The door creaked open, and in the doorway appeared a little girl. She was barefoot, in pajamas with a painted princess, and tears were running down her cheeks. In the smoky hall of the biker bar, Iron Wolves, it immediately became quieter. One by one the bikers turned around. Their stern faces with scars and beards seemed to turn to stone. No one understood how a small child could end up here, in the lair of those whom the city feared. The girl was trembling, but in her eyes there was despair and firmness. She knew why she'd come. She went straight to the scariest man in the room, Snake, the president of the club. This giant, almost 1.95 meters tall, with hands like oak logs and a face covered with scars, made even the bravest shiver. But the girl did not look away. She came closer, carefully tugged on his vest, and whispered so quietly that only he could hear the words. "The evil man locked my mom in the basement. She does not wake up. He said that if I tell anyone, he will hurt my little brother. But my mom said that bikers protect people." In the hall, one could hear the ash falling from a cigarette. Even the music from the jukebox stopped. Snake slowly knelt down before the girl, and now next to him she seemed completely tiny. His low voice sounded gentle, almost in a whisper. "What is your name, princess?" "Emma," she answered, and barely holding back tears, she added, "The evil man is a policeman. That is why my mom said to look only for you." These words tore the air like thunder. The bikers exchanged glances. A policeman, that is a man behind whom stands a system, power, and untouchability. But Snake did not hesitate for a second. He lifted Emma in his arms so easily, as if she weighed nothing, and swept the hall with an icy gaze. "Brothers," he said, "we are going." Chairs clattered. The men rose almost simultaneously. The atmosphere in the bar changed instantly. It was no longer just a company of rebels. It was a pack ready to protect. Everyone understood that today they were entering into a war not only with man, but also with a system. Hawk, take the connection, find the address through Snake. Patch, give the little one chocolate milk, and carefully write down her house. Razor and Diesel, noise in the north in 10 minutes. Loud but clean. The rest, arm yourselves. Emma, trembling, showed the house on the phone. It belonged to Officer Frank Miller, publicly respected, but known among neighbors for outbursts of anger. Now the truth was obvious. Snake placed the girl next to Patch, who covered her with a jacket so that she would be warm. The rest were getting ready. The roar of Harley engines soon filled the night. They knew there was no turning back. But no one doubted. For this girl and her mother, it was worth going to the end. The night outside the city breathed with cold and the smoke of gasoline. In the distance, engines thundered. It was Razor and Diesel rushing north. The roar of their Harleys deafened the streets, distracting everyone who might pay attention. People peered out of their windows, thinking that the bikers once again caused another riot. But in reality, it was cover for what was happening in another part of the city. Snake and 3 of his most trusted brothers moved quietly like shadows. A block before Miller's house, they turned off their engines and pushed their motorcycles by hand, so as not to draw unnecessary attention. The wind tugged at their leather vests, on which the wolf skull, the symbol of the club, gleamed. But on this night, they were not predators for the sake of strength. They were hunters for the sake of justice. Miller's house loomed as a dark silhouette. The windows glowed with dim yellow light. Snake was the first to crawl through the back window, carefully, as if it were his own territory. It was through this window that Emma had once escaped, running from horror. Now it became the entrance for those who came to protect her. Inside it smelled of dampness and iron. In the corner of a crib, they found a baby. Tiny Leo, Emma's little brother. He cried softly, choking on his tears, but he was alive. One of the bikers wrapped him in a blanket and pressed him to his chest, gently as if he were a fragile, precious stone. It was a first ray of hope. But the worst was still ahead. A heavy door with a rusty lock led to the basement. Snake smashed it open with his shoulder, and a dull thud spread through the whole house. Downstairs it was dark. Only the weak light of a flashlight pulled outlines out of gloom. There among the damp and dirt, they found Sarah. She lay on the cold concrete, beaten unconscious, but breathing. On her face were marks of blows. Her hands were tied. At that moment, Snake felt icy rage inside, but he restrained it. He bent down, carefully lifted her into his arms, as if he was afraid of breaking her. For a giant with hands like logs, it was almost tender. He held her close and quietly said, "You are safe now." While they were leading Sarah and Leo outside, Hawk made a phone call. Using a disguised voice, he called Miller himself. The girl went to the Iron Wolves. "It seems she is talking." Miller's answer was short but terrifying. "That brat, when I am done here, I will finish what I started." These words became a sentence for him. The recording immediately went to the highway patrol and to journalists of the neighboring district. Now he had neither cover nor excuses. Within 10 minutes, the family was already far away. The bikers brought them to the clubhouse, a place where no outsiders dared enter. Everything was ready there: a doctor, a room for children, food, warm blankets. Sarah was alive, but had not yet regained consciousness. Emma held her little brother tightly, as if afraid of losing him again, and around them stood men whom the city considered dangerous, and it was they who became their wall. And at that time Miller, sensing trouble, hurried back home. But in the house there was neither victim nor silent secrets, only emptiness and a quiet draft from the basement. His words were already being relayed by the patrolman over the radio, and reporters were preparing a sensation. Everything he thought of as his power crumbled to dust. A few hours had passed. In the clubhouse there was silence, broken only by the steady hum of the refrigerator and the distant rustle of trees outside the windows. Sarah lay on the couch, being examined by a doctor. On her face the marks of the beatings were still visible, but her breathing had become calm. Emma sat beside her, holding her mother's hand and not letting go for a second. Little Leo slept, covered with a biker's jacket, and snored softly, as if everything that had happened was only a terrible dream. The men of the club gathered in the hall. Their faces were stony, their eyes serious. No one spoke unnecessary words. They knew the war was only beginning. But at that moment, the most important thing had already been done. The family had been saved. A few days later, the news spread across the entire state. Frank Miller was taken into federal custody. His voice, full of rage and threats, sounded on all television channels. The corruption that he had hidden for years surfaced. In the investigation, facts were revealed that no one had dared even to whisper about. Torture, falsifications, intimidation. All of it collapsed on him like an avalanche. The city that had feared his power now saw in him a monster. The irony was that people had always seen the real monsters in bikers. But it was they who that night became defenders who could not be replaced by badges or laws. The Iron Wolves became famous as heroes, although they themselves never wanted that. For them it was not heroism. It was a pact that stood up to protect the weak. Sarah, after a couple of weeks, was already able to sit on the porch of the clubhouse. Next to her, Leo was playing, and Emma was chasing fireflies. Snake stood nearby, watching as Grizzly, one of the toughest bikers, allowed the girl to take a firefly right off his boot. At that moment, the giant's face trembled, and a barely noticeable smile slid across his lips. "No one would have believed me," Sarah said quietly, looking at Snake. "But I always told Emma, some defenders have a badge, others leather. I knew that you would see in my children people and not my past." Snake shook his head. His voice sounded low and calm. "We are not heroes, ma'am. We are only monsters whom other monsters fear. The real courage here is in your daughter." He looked at Emma, who was laughing and catching fireflies in her hands. She had passed through the night to find those whom everyone considered dangerous. But it was these very people who turned out to be the ones who took her family into their pack and vowed that no one would ever hurt them again. And when the sun was setting over the city, and in the distance the motorcycles rumbled once more, the air was filled with the scent of pines and gasoline. The broken family found new guardians. They were not just saved, they were accepted. Now they had a pact that would protect them until the end.